Racing Towards a Better World, a series of podcasts to guide and support the Irish racing and breeding industry on its sustainability journey, brought to you by the Irish Field and Horse Racing Ireland.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Racing to a Better World podcast, Hedgehunter, Biodiversity in Racing. What if I told you this podcast could save you money and help you improve the health of your horses? I'm Helen Sharpe and I'm delighted to have you with me as we explore how biodiversity and the racing world can thrive together. Today's episode is all about celebrating the efforts being made across our industry to protect and enhance the natural world that surrounds and supports our sport. I'm thrilled to be joined by four experts in their field: Alan Creighton, Head of Environment and Nutrition at the Irish Equine Centre; Richard Mulcahy, co-founder of the 100 Million Trees Project; Dr. Maria Fitzpatrick, Business Development Manager of Business for Biodiversity Ireland; and Evergreen Bloodstock's Michéal Conaghan. So if you're mucking out, driving to the sales, or just out for a walk, stay with us for some practical insights for your own farm or business. Now then, biodiversity. It's not just a buzzword, it's the soil under our horses' hooves. And a man who can tell us a lot more about that soil is Alan Creighton. Alan, as you might know, or you may not know, works with trainers and stud owners as part of his role at the Irish Equine Centre. He works internationally too on all aspects of equine biosecurity, nutrition and performance. A former show jumper, and I've heard also a bit of a pin hooker and a massive, I suppose, fan as well of thoroughbred racing, and a keen breeder. So I suppose the first question I have is, why is soil testing such a critical yet often overlooked component of equine land management in Ireland, particularly in breeding and training operations?
Well, Helen, I suppose the first point to make is that we're very lucky in this country that we have a very good quality of soil. And I think that's often the reason why we tend to overlook it, because, you know, when I work in other countries who don't have the same depth of soil, same quality of soil, they have to work an awful lot harder to grow the grass that we need to produce those top quality animals, no matter what discipline it's at, whether it's eventing, show, jumping, racing. So a lot of the international clients do look at trying to purchase farms in Ireland. There's two main reasons for that, obviously. One is the quality of staff we have here, but obviously the quality of soil is a huge thing. In the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to grow grass that provides the nutrition and the minerals we need to produce animals that can withstand the rigours of high-level sport. It's no different to any athlete. They have to have good bone density, they have to have good development form, etc. So the foundation of that is soil, and the soil health and what we put into it is, you know, it's a really important factor.
Yeah, I think someone once told me that I wasn't to be a horse farmer, I was to be a grass farmer. You've spoken about the link between soil health and animal health. Can you explain how imbalances or deficiencies in the soil might directly affect the performance or well-being of people's horses?
Well, there's two aspects to that. And again, I'm very lucky that I've spent 28 years now working for the Equine Centre. And, you know, as you said already, my two main focuses are biosecurity and then land management. So they are inexplicably linked. If you work in reverse, I will often get called to a farm where you might have a problem such as a Clostridia scour in foals where they've had an outbreak, or a Rhodococcus respiratory infection in foals. And the first place I go to look actually is the paddocks themselves, because they're both soil-borne organisms that can thrive when you have a lot of poached soil. So if you look at from that point of view, from that pure respiratory and enteric point of view, if you can promote good grass, stable grass growth, well, you're not exposing the soil so much, and therefore you're not exposing those negative bacteria so much. When you look at the development side of it itself, if you don't have healthy soil, you're not going to farm the minerals out of that soil into the grass that you need for good bone density. You know, we actually look at statistics on farms whereby you can actually get a percentage of fractures or a percentage of DODs, developmental issues, with bone problems in race horses or show jumpers. And the really well-managed pasture land farms are the ones who have the less problems when it comes to fractures. So there's measurables there. And like in the end of the day, we are trying to get the minerals that we need bone development and good conformation out of the soil, but that doesn't happen by chance. There is a lot of work that goes into it, and you have to optimise those soil conditions.
Yeah, with increasing environmental pressure on agriculture in general, how can accurate soil testing support more sustainable pasture management whilst reducing inputs like artificial fertilisers?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things we preach about, and I know this is a little bit controversial thing to say, but the Ukraine war, when it happened and fertiliser prices went through the roof, it actually was a little bit of a help, a big bit of a help to me, to be honest, because I'd been preaching for so long about the overuse of fertilisers in the industry, and there's huge biodiversity issues with that, and obviously sustainability issues. And the first place I always try and start now with farms that we work with is the financial sense of accurate farming. You know, and there's very good examples, and I might give you one in a minute, but basically a lot of the farms that I go to where they've got developmental problems, it's often down to over-fertilising rather than under-fertilising. It's not down to a lack of nutrients, it's actually oversupply of it. Horses are very different to cattle and sheep because they've only got one stomach, they're monogastric. So they need a balance of nutrient. They don't need peaks and troughs. So to do that, you know, there is some very simple basics that we deal with, and that is the pH of the soil, the P and K levels of the soil, and then the organic matter level in the soil. And we know if you look at the indexes of P and Ks, you know, in a high-level dairy farm, you're going to be up at index 4, right? But we're looking at high index 2, low index 3 for P and K levels. So we're getting a nice steady growth, not flushes of growth. We're looking for an organic matter level of about 10% because we know then that the biological level in the soil is going to be so much more optimised for minerals to transport up and down through the plant. And the final thing is, which is very important, we're looking for the pH of the soil to be between 6.3 and 6.5. Now, to do that, you know, obviously if you're in an acidic soil, you need lime. If you're in a low nutrient soil, you need to have some sort of application of P and K, whether that's through organic matter or through bagged fertiliser. And then the organic matter level itself, I do think, obviously, over the last 40 or 50 years, when fertilisers were cheap, everybody went to bagged fertiliser instead of thinking about farmyard manures, other forms of organic compound that actually are much better for our soils. So we know when we optimise those conditions, we get the grass growth we need for horses, and then we get the development of those bone structures in those horses that's going to complement that.
It's kind of incredible to think about the correlation. I don't think we often think about the correlation between the nutrition that comes from the good soil and actually manifests itself in bone in these horses. For stud farms and equestrian properties across Ireland, what are some of the most common soil issues that you encounter? How can these be addressed with the long-term benefit to both horses and the land?
Well, you know, as I've already kind of pointed out, I definitely think over-fertilising is a huge problem. You know, we don't have great access to organic matter because if you think of cattle farming, you know, they'll use any cattle that are housed over the winter, they'll reuse all that bedding and they'll put it back out on the land. Whereas there's always been this, I suppose, reluctance amongst the horse industry that if we reuse our bedding as an organic matter for soil, that we're going to spread disease. And that actually is true in some sense, but the reality is that if you take that organic matter and compost it properly, it's more than likely safe. And we're actually going to do a study now with the Thoroughbred Breeders Association in the UK and the ITBA here in Ireland, where we're going to try and prove that if you compost waste from animal bedding properly, horse bedding in particular, that it actually is nothing, only a benefit to the soil. So one of the biggest issues is probably that lack of access to organic matter, and then what happens is they just keep throwing bagged fertiliser on the soil, which drives the pH down. You end up with acidic conditions. And under those acidic conditions, the plant is much more likely to take up unwanted minerals like iron and aluminium that are antagonistic in nature, and less likely to take up copper, zinc, magnesium, all those really good minerals that we need for good bone growth. So there's a balance to be struck. And as I said, if you can get to kind of pH of 6.3 to 6.5, it's a huge big help. The other thing I suppose is, and we've touched on it during other conversations, horses are hard on land. If you've got stocking density is probably the biggest problem I come across. And with that stocking density, it ends up too many horses on too small a farm, and they don't see the benefit of cross-grazing, because really, if you want a really efficient farm, cross-grazing is the way to go. So where you would have sheep and cattle in the same cycle. So a lot of the big farmers, the bigger farms that I work with, we're trying to encourage, obviously, good soil testing, so you're optimising your conditions. You're trying to encouraging overseeding with palatable grasses, because horses are hard on pasture. They tend to pull grass and it comes out by the roots. And then obviously with competition, the unpalatable grasses, if they are allowed to go to seed, they become the dominant species in the sward. So if you actually cross graze with sheep and cattle, they can clean up those unpalatable grasses. They also are not as hard on the land. They do a very good job with parasites, for example. They control the grasses that we don't need for horses. And then if you can cycle them with good rest periods for soil, you're going to get much better production of the grasses that you want when you need it. So, I mean, that stocking density is a huge issue.
Is there a recommended stocking density? Because I think that would be helpful for people.
Historically, right, it all depends on the type of horse you have, the quality of your own land, how wet, how dry it is, how deep your soil is, the quality of your soil. That all plays into the picture. But historically, the recommendation would be there should be a mare, her foal and her yearling for every 10 acres.
Wow.
Right? So if you think in Ireland, which is, it's an amazing country for horse production, it's really only the very big farms that would have that stocking density.
Yeah.
So most of us, and I include myself in this, will fall into, we're overstocked. Well, now if you're overstocked, you really have to concentrate on your grassland management, because you're putting it under severe pressure. So yeah, that takes some careful minding.
Yeah, and I suppose the other question just that was raised from what you were saying is, what is palatable grazing? Like, what grasses should we be sowing for horses? That, quite often people are throwing on the same grass that they throw on for the cattle. And then how does that impact if you are cross grazing and you need a grass that suits everybody?
Well, look, I think from me at this stage, I'm very black and white when it comes to stuff like this. The first thing I do when I go onto a farm that's cross grazing, I say, if you're breeding high level horses, it has to be a horse farm first, and the cattle and sheep do a job. So the economic activity cannot be reliant solely on the cattle and the sheep, because they're two very different types of grazers. So in that case, you are obviously, if it's a stud farm that happens to have cattle and sheep, well then the grass mix you put on is going to have to suit the horses first. And within that you've got, obviously rye grasses, some timothy, some smooth stalk meadow grasses. I have no problem with herbs at a certain level. Obviously, because I work for the Irish Equine Centre and our main mantra is around health, I try to keep away from those herbs that if they become dominant in the sward, that they can cause health issues for horses. I try and stay away from those ones. But I do see a lot of benefit with herbs, not just for the fact that they are very good at mining good minerals, but also they're very good around gateways and water troughs to hold the structure of the soil, because they're quite deep rooted. So yeah, they would be a big benefit. The ones you don't want to see too much of is, I suppose, with the big difference with dairy is that horses don't tolerate clover as well as cattle do. So I don't particularly like to see clover any more than 10%. And I know when it comes to carbon sequestration, that's not a very good thing to say, but in the end of the day, it suits the cattle industry, it doesn't suit the horse industry.
Okay, so keeping soil and manure and things in mind, we are going to go over now to a call-in from breeder and pinhooker, I think it's okay to call you that, Michéal Conaghan. So County Limerick's Michéal Conaghan won the Weatherby's Next Generation Award in 2023. He famously bought Goff's Land Rover bumper winner Absolute Notions as a foal, and after failing to sell him as a store, he took the bold move to put the horse in training with Gordon Elliott. 2 days after the horse won at Punchestown last April. He was sold for 370,000. Michéal's also involved in the flat side of the business and has had a great year at the sales under both codes. Obviously, Michéal and his grandfather, Michael, also bred Paisley Park, who pretty much needs no introductions, 9 Class 1 races. So welcome, Michéal. Thanks so much for joining us. I know it's not easy. You're coming in straight from the farm.
Hello, Helen.
I just wanted to ask you, really, I just knew that you had been managing your manure on the farm in quite innovative ways quite early on. So really, we just wanted to get a sort of grassroots opinion on what's going on with manure management and also maybe some ideas of how it could become easier for other people to follow your lead. I suppose manure management's part of the daily life on any breeding farm, but it's rarely talked about. So can you describe how you currently handle disposal or the use of manure at your operation?
So, mainly the reason we were doing it was to keep pests and vermin out of the yard. So we used to use the mushroom factory in Carberry. They'd collect our droppings once a week or every couple of weeks whenever we had a load of it, and they would take it and use it for growing mushrooms, mostly straw, a little bit of sawdust. That's how we were doing it. Now that we've moved areas, we use different people take it for bedding under cattle or other sorts of animals because it's so good and it's all fresh coming out. Other people can get second-hand use out of it in dairy farms and under sheep and cattle. So there's a couple of people around us that take it for that.
That's brilliant. Do you know if any of those cattle farmers or anything go on then to use that and compost it or anything? Would you know that?
I know I do. They once it breaks down underneath and they toss it over, they would spread it out in the land. I'm not sure what the machines are called, but that's what they do.
Yeah, no problem. There is a growing focus on sustainability in agriculture. Do you think, as a breeder yourself, do you think there's enough support and guidance available for breeders when it comes to environmentally responsible manure disposal in general? Do you feel there could be more support out there in helping people?
I suppose you could always do more for it, but what committee or what group to do it, or the ITBA or something like that, is it?
Yeah, I know that's the thing. I suppose hypothetical at this stage of who you would ask. I suppose in that same vein of looking ahead, do you see potential for racing and breeding industry to collaborate in a more circular or community-based waste solution? So a kind of co-op, especially in the areas with high concentrations of studs and yards, Kildare and Tip and things like that. Do you think there could be scope for a cooperative so that maybe you take your manure to a local depot of some sort and you get some sort of pathogen-free fertiliser back for your fields?
Yeah, that'd be a great idea. I think that'd be a great initiative. If there was somewhere to store it and turn it into fertiliser or natural fertiliser, that would be a brilliant idea if they had one in every county or something.
Brilliant. No, it's good to hear that there'd be interest in that sort of initiative. I think it would take a lot to get off the ground. Everyone's nodding around the table here, so we maybe talk about that in a little while. Unless anyone wants to jump in now with any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, just from Michéal, Alan here, from my own point of view, it makes total sense. A lot of the really big farms across Europe will take their horse manure, put it under the cattle or the sheep, and let them break it down further. And then once it comes out of there, they compost it for another few weeks and they make it into an absolutely brilliant natural fertiliser that's slow release, which we really want. In the horse industry, again, getting away from our peaks and troughs that we get with bagged fertiliser. So you get a slow release fertiliser that's there when the conditions are right for the grass plant to grow. And then the other side of it is they tend to have they definitely have better level of minerals that we need in the soil anyway, and it's increasing that organic matter and microbiome in the soil itself. So it's, in the end of the day, horse farmers have this resource that we sometimes have to pay to get taken away, and then we have to go and buy fertiliser back. Whereas surely if organisations get together and have a depot plant in each county, as Michéal says, You bring your manure in, it gets composted properly, and you get something safe back that's good for your land. It's a great sustainability story.
So next we're going to go on to Dr. Maria Fitzpatrick, who is the Business Development Manager of Business for Biodiversity Ireland. She's working with Irish businesses to ensure they get the most from their membership of the BFBI. She's a biodiversity and sustainability consultant, and she has a PhD in freshwater ecology and lots of other things, actually, Maria. You're pretty impressive. You've worked at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew to build and head the research funding services for Kew Science as well. Your background blends scientific expertise with project and relationship management skills, and you have a keen understanding of the environmental challenges our world is facing to build compelling cases for change, which I guess is why we have you here today. You know, we're hearing from the breeders and things, but also from the business point of view. There's a lot to be said on biodiversity. Biodiversity is often seen as a farming issue, but what role do you see the Irish racing and bloodstock industries playing in supporting biodiversity on and around their land?
Well, I think we need to look at this as a challenge for everybody. It's not just a blame game and saying it's the farmers or this or that or the other. It's everybody. It's a whole of society, a whole of government approach that we need. And that came out of the 4th National Biodiversity Action Plan. And we're all stakeholders in biodiversity. We all draw down from nature. Land in use by agriculture is over 70%. So yes, it is one of our biggest assets, and our farmers are the stewards of our land, who need the right support from us. And yes, that will include financial incentives to get this right. But we need to head towards a nature positive economy. And in order to get that, we need to support our farmers. We need to support the industry and the businesses that rely on our farms. We need to build resilient and regenerative farms. And that's the baseline for me. But how do we get this? So we need to create awareness and build capacity. And that's what we do at Business for Biodiversity Ireland. We work with businesses to really build that capacity within businesses and organisations. We need this information. You don't ask a doctor to do your accounts. You need the people with expertise really there to help you and move forward. And you need examples and you need case studies. And I was looking last night at just examples around, and one of them is Fairyhouse. We have a really good example to start the industry going there. And I know there's been trees planted by Richard and his team, and there's lots of things on site there. So really it is about leading by example and showing what can be done. It's really understanding your impacts, your dependencies, the opportunities and the risks involved. And don't forget, there are risks involved for biodiversity, but also for the business. We have reputations here to think about. And it's really, really important that we take that all on board. But my main point here is that we need to lead by example, and we need biodiversity at our boardroom tables. We need them having these discussions at those senior levels. So that's what's really important. And I think that's where the leaders in this area can really help.
Yeah, leading by example. Yeah. And the case studies. I think we all had a big chat over lunch about needing case studies. So the people with the money, I guess, have to put their hands in the pockets and start to fund some of this research. Many stud farms and training yards occupy large areas of semi-natural grassland and hedgerow networks. How can these equine properties become champions of biodiversity, but without compromising this operational efficiency?
I think, first of all, we have to understand what we have. I think we always say engage an ecologist. So if you want to understand your baseline, how you are currently using the land is really important. And I equate it to, like, if you're going to buy a horse to breed or to race, you get a vet in. You get it checked, you see it walk, you see it run, you understand the pedigree. So that's what you need for your land. You need to understand what's there, what it's made up of, and how you're going to use it as well. And again, I'll go back to building capacity within your organisation. Again, as I watched, there was a little video on the Fairyhouse website on HRI, and it's just having that staff there that had that knowledge. I think there's another Richard that was there. He's the track foreman, and he just had such knowledge and such passion for that ground. And having that within your organisation is really, really important and really, really key. And for business who haven't got a clue, don't know where to start, there are support mechanisms out there. Again, I'll plug Business for Biodiversity Ireland because we are passionate about what we do. We are a not-for-profit, and we do have a programme there to help people no matter what part of your journey you're in. But there are savings to be made for our farms, for our race courses. You saw the example, again, I'll go back to your example with Fairy House, because they saved money. They put in fences to keep the sheep at different parts of the course, so they didn't have to bring in mowers and diesel and pay all those labour costs, etc. So it saved money and it's paid back. Those fencing cost money, yeah, it was initial cost up front, but they have reaped the rewards in terms of putting that in. And that's just one example. And that can be replicated. I'm sure Fairy House have an awful lot more to do and can do, but they're a good example of what other courses and other breeders and stud farms can do.
What are the practical steps, though? You know, what practical steps can racehorse owners, breeders, syndicates take to align with these values but still meeting commercial goals? Because I think that's going to make all the difference if you can persuade people that both things can be done simultaneously.
But what you can do on land that is pretty inexpensive in terms of connecting habitats, making sure that you have pollinators, you have space for mammals, you have space for birds on your site. That, again, inexpensive. And if you have people like Richard coming from the 100 million tree project and coming in to support and help, that is really a no-brainer to me, because you're then encouraging your site, you're bringing your site along for more biodiversity. And again, you're maintaining that land, you're maintaining that grass. If you have a reservoir for water on your site, you need to irrigate, so you have that there. There's a cutting cost. You've also got a cutting cost. If we look at renewable energy and we look at how we were fueling our site, the energy cost there, can we cut costs? Can we put a solar panel on our roof to use for electricity? So there are lots of things that obviously need an initial upfront investment, but then you reap the rewards. And that's with any business. When you're going in with any startup, any business, you're putting an initial investment in there. And we need to see it like that. And we need to see it that it's something for the future, and it's to make sure that the business is long-term and sustainable.
In terms of species itself that we are putting in there, are there particular native species or habitats that are under pressure, especially in the equine-dominated regions of Ireland, that you believe the industry could actively help restore or protect if they're already there?
I think maybe not equine specific. I would say, I'm sure for in the pastures, and maybe again Alan can speak to that in terms of what plants could be in there that are for the better. But you have to understand your landscape. You have to understand the land that you're there, the soil, the geology of the area, what you're putting in there, what's going to grow best there, because you obviously wanted to grow and to be productive and to be useful. So it's really about understanding that. But then how can you, within that landscape, how can you connect habitats? If you've got maybe a hare's corner, or you've got a pond, how are you connecting that? Remember, mammals and small insects, they need corridors to be able to move between habitats. And if you've got a hedgerow, hedgerows, again, are so valuable. It really, when I'm moving around the countryside and I see hedgerows being pulled out or hedgerows that are not intact, it just makes me sad, because then you don't have those connections. So two things I always, because they're close to my heart, is hedgerows. If you have an opportunity to increase your hedgerow on your land, do it. And also when it comes to river and water and our water courses, buffer zones along our rivers. If you are using fertilisers, we don't want them going into our river course. We need healthy water, we need healthy soil, so that we have healthy animals on our farm, for us and for our health as well. It's all connected. We're all nature, and we need to protect it.
I think just for anyone who doesn't know just what a buffer zone is, maybe just clarify a buffer zone for people.
So a buffer zone is where we plant trees beside the rivers. So we protect it. It protects fertilisers, nutrients from going into the water and polluting the water. And it protects from animals perhaps going down to the water where it's not being fenced as well, and protects it from degradation in that respect. So protecting the banks and the vegetation on the banks. So they're really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, your passion on the project is definitely palpable. It's fantastic to talk to you. I suppose you've actually given quite a few messages there. But just, I suppose, finally, what message would you give to breeders or yard managers who maybe see biodiversity as an abstract or a secondary concern, especially in this high-performance, results-driven industry like racing?
Well, I would say, and it's going to agree with what Alan says. Like, I look at it, and you look at athletes around the world and how they've propelled their performance forward in terms of their nutrition and what they use, the minerals and vitamins. Same for our horses, same for our ground. We get that nutrition from what grows from nature, and we're best with unprocessed food. Like, we want to pristine what comes from nature. That's how we're going to thrive. And animals and horses are very good at picking what they need at any one time. They know instinctively what to take from the land if it is there. So diversity is there. We want strong, healthy, high quality stock on our farms, and that's where we're going to make the money. So invest in your land, invest in nature, and just remember your reputation as well. Reputation in the industry is really important. And understanding that you're treating your animals in the right way in terms of nutrition, and then in terms of the land and bringing that all together, it's really important. So we need to be doing this together. It's collaboration. You can't do it. You can't do it on your own. I think you need to learn from others, and we need to do it. But somebody needs to lead. Someone needs to step forward, take that risk, and say, "Listen, I'm going to give this a go. Are you coming in with me?" And I loved when you were talking there to Michéal about a co-op. And again, a co-op, bringing collaboration, bringing communities together to solve a problem. We're great at it in Ireland. We have been great over the years, and I think we can really push forward in this area for this industry also.
That's fantastic. You've got me riled up and ready to go. So thank you so much, Maria. That's brilliant. And then I think we're probably going to follow with equal passion over to Richard Mulcahy, co-founder of the 100 Million Trees Project. There's lots of things on Richard's CV that I could go through. I suppose we'll stick to the lane and say he's got extensive management experience in diverse companies, and he's also done a bit of presenting, so he's probably going to be the smoothest of the talkers on this podcast. Richard's had a lifelong interest in the environment and purchased his first small forest of 11 hectares in 2000. Since then, he's planted a further 46 hectares of mixed native and pine trees on his farm, Wexford-Wicklow border. It was from this interest in trees and the environment that he conceived the idea of the 100 Million Trees Project. Richard, I'm going to hand over to you. You may be able to expand upon the project and let people know who don't know what it is.
So I suppose where the idea came from is I've been in business all my life, and I realised that I was a contributor to the chaotic state our climate's in at the moment, with flying and consuming and just generally living. We haven't been very focused on what we're actually doing to nature, and it made me realise that I had done a lot of damage, as my family had and all the people around me. So I thought, it's time to give back. It's time to try and do something, because politicians are all based on short-term gain, and we have to be thinking the long term here and doing something. So I had planted trees. I had been interested in planting trees when we were kids. Dad was very interested in trees, and he used to make us dig the holes, and then he'd put the tree in. So we did the heavy lifting. So what I wanted to do was to see how we could give people an opportunity to actually do something for the environment. And trees are the quickest way to sequester carbon. We have lots of all sorts of different ideas going on about reducing our carbon output, but trees are the ones that grab carbon the quickest. And particularly using the method, we're using a method called the Miyawaki method, which was introduced by a Japanese botanist, and he discovered that by planting native trees together in soil, that it improves the soil, the trees, it creates areas of biodiversity that will be 10 times greater than traditional planting. It reduces temperature by having trees close together. There are huge benefits to it, but the most important is that the trees grow 10 times as quickly. So, obviously this is difficult to believe, and we did some research, and our first planting was in Tintern Abbey in Wexford, and we planted trees 2.5 years ago, 15 species of native trees. And 2.5 years later, they're up at 14, 15 feet. So it's just phenomenal, the growth in the trees. And the benefits, Maria was talking there about biodiversity, the huge benefits for biodiversity. Areas, I bought a farm in 2004, And the farmer, it was 164 acres, and the farmer had cleared every single tree and every single hedgerow. And so, talking about creating corridors for animals, if you remove the hedgerows and the trees, then the animals don't have that corridor. So the Miyawaki method has really impressed us, and what we came up with this concept that if we could get companies to sponsor, that we would go out and we would ask people to donate a quarter acre of their land, where we would come along, we would provide the 15 species of trees, and we would plant them for them free of charge. And it's just taken off. It's been absolutely phenomenal, the interest in it, and people actually feel that they're doing something constructive.
Yeah, it's enabling people to be part of the solution, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because often we're all a bit lost as to how to, we all maybe, or some of us are aware of the massive problem that there is, but quite often people feel a bit lost as to what to do. So I can understand that.
And it's trying to get people to realise that what we have coming down the tracks for the next generation is going to be disastrous if we don't take control of them. And when you consider Ireland, we have an amazing legacy. It was really interesting listening to Alan talking about soil and things. We have an amazing country. It's the one thing about Ireland that you don't find in any other country is you could literally throw a seed on the ground and it'll grow. And you don't find that. The Miyawaki method requires, for most countries, to do a huge amount of preparation for the land and adding manure and straw and doing all sorts of things. In Ireland, we don't have to do anything. You just literally plough the land and you put the trees in. You don't even have to take the weeds out, and the trees grow. So we have a unique opportunity in this country, but we need to get the leaders, people who have a legacy like in the horse racing business, to take ownership of this as well, because they're the ones with big land holdings that they could make a difference. And Alan again was talking about nutrients and soil. I mean, the leaf mold, and that you use all of these things for fertilizers. There's so many advantages to it, apart from the biodiversity side of things that you could do.
Yeah, I think you've maybe answered my next question, but you've kind of described trees as the lungs of the land. So how do you see that working in the Irish racing industry, particularly the large breeding yards and the training yards? They're playing a role in rewilding or reforesting the land they occupy. Is it just by planting trees, or is it adopting all of the things that we've talked about today?
Oh no, it has to be a mixture. But from our perspective, where we're coming from is we want to try and extract as much carbon as possible, as quickly as possible from the air, because only if we start extracting the carbon instead of letting it continue to grow, the temperature is going to keep increasing. It's going to have a huge impact. I would assume, I'm not a scientist, but I mean, the people around me are obviously the scientists and the experts here. But I would imagine if the temperature keeps going up, that grass quality is going to go down, and that's going to have a significant impact on the industry. So I think from a legacy point of view, and horse racing, that land, there's plenty of space on these lands to plant trees. So they should think as an immediate benefit to the environment, to sequester carbon and to create spaces for animals and insects.
I think it's worth mentioning here that there's almost 800,000 trees.
Yeah, so we've had our second year planting. Next year we're planting 1.3 million trees, so we'll be up at 2 million by the end of next year. But quote goes, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, and that's what we're doing. So the more we do, the more people are getting involved, and we've done a number of race courses. We've planted in Galway, in Naas, in Fairyhouse, and in Limerick, and they've been very supportive, and it's great. Not only have they embraced it, but they've asked us to come back and plant more trees for them. So it's fantastic that the horse racing industry is looking seriously on something like this.
Yeah, so there has been an uptake of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's really positive. Yeah. So many racing yards pride themselves on heritage and land stewardship. What's the case for encouraging racehorse owners and breeders to dedicate parts of the land to native tree planting?
Well, apart from that, if they don't do this and they just are like everybody else, where they're just focusing on their own business, if they don't take responsibility as part of protecting the environment, their business is going to be damaged. But if nothing else, to even think of the next generation, we have to start thinking about what we're leaving for our children and their children. And that's important. It's really important to get people to focus on that as well. It's not just about business, but it's about humans and about our future.
That's a great way to think about it, actually, isn't it? It's kind of footprint for generations to come.
And particularly when you think about the trees, the species, the oaks will last for 300 years. So there's lots of generations there. We need to be mindful of things like that.
We talked a little bit earlier off the podcast, but everybody was kind of in agreement that time and patience is required for this. And it was pointed out, it's taken many, many years for us to get into this state of climate crisis, and that people have to find a level of patience to introduce these things to their farms. Obviously, trees, you're saying, is it's the quickest way that people can make an impact. But does anyone else have any thoughts just on that, taking the time and what sort of time it will take and how these things will play out?
I think just agreeing with what Richard's saying in terms of intergenerational is so important. Like, I do have 3 young girls coming through, and you want to do the best that you can for them. And I see even on our farm at home, my dad and my nephew, my sister, and it's really important that we bring in these new approaches in some ways. And I know we have to challenge maybe sometimes our older generations in terms of what they're doing, and they've gotten used to it, but it's really important that we do that and that we do it together. And it's not, again, as I said, it's not blaming anyone for what they've done in the past, but we're doing this for the future generations. We're doing this because there is a crisis. And we do need to do our bit. And I think the horse industry can play their part as well as every other industry in Ireland to really secure the future for the next generations.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, just thinking, if I think of all the stud farms that we work on, for safety reasons, we often round corners on paddocks because we don't want animals to get trapped in the corner. And you end up with a dead space in the corner of a lot of fields that take maintaining. So there's actually a double whammy. You could plant trees in all those corners. You don't have to maintain it in the same way. There's no mechanical mowing, etc., etc. And you're actually creating a better shelter belt for the animals. And also, as the world warms up, you don't get that grass drying out, or the soil doesn't dry out as much around that tree belt, and your grass will continue to grow. Last week, I spent a lot of time in the east coast of the UK last week, and it is very noticeable. Any farm that didn't have good tree cover had very little grass because the wind and the heat at the same time had dried it up and everything has gone into a dormant state. So again, both, I definitely can see tree planting in a much bigger way being a huge benefit to the horse industry.
Yeah, I wish we had 4 hours for this. I did, Richard, want to ask you that one question, though, that if you could plant a symbolic tree at every racecourse in Ireland, what species would you choose and what would you hope it represents?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't plant one tree in every racecourse. I'd want each racecourse to be planting 10,000 trees. And obviously the oak, because one of the most famous races we have in this country in the Curragh is the Irish oaks. So the oak is probably the tree that carries some most biodiversity for animals, for insects, for for birds, mammals. So the oak would definitely be the tree I would go for. And when you consider that Ireland was 75% covered by oak trees, 10,000 years ago, and we're down, we only have 600 million native trees in Ireland now. We really need to get back to planting. So I'm calling out to all race courses, let's plant native trees and lots of oaks.
I love that. It's perfect. I think before we sign off, I just thought it's a real privilege to get your 3 minds in this room together. And I wondered if you had any questions for each other that you might like to ask at this point.
I mean, there are lots of questions. Obviously, from a scientific point, it was really interesting listening to Helen explain. I mean, I have to take vitamins as I get old and crotchety to maintain my bone structure. But it's the exact same for horses, as you say, to listen to you describe the scientific approach to that. I mean, horses sound like they get better fed and they have more healthy nutrients than us humans.
Well, I suppose, Richard, and this is no offence, I don't know your sporting background, but they're probably capable of winning more money than you are. So it's a good place to start. But, it is very interesting. We can optimise the conditions for bone growth. And look, there are feed companies do a great job, supplement companies do a great job. But the reality is in Ireland, we actually have it already there in the soil. It's just a matter of optimising the conditions to get it out of it. Other countries don't have that option. So when it comes to nutrition in horses in particular, they actually have a very small stomach and it doesn't take very long for all their nutrients to pass through the digestive system. So their opportunity for uptake of minerals is quite short when they're in a stable environment. When they're in the field and they're grazing for up to 22 or 23 hours a day, they're all the time absorbing nutrients if they're available. So the most efficient way to develop animals is in that field-based structure. But we also have to make sure that we are making sure that soil is being optimised to produce the type of grasses that we need. And it doesn't happen by chance, and it's like a big oil tanker. It takes a bit of time to turn, but you have to start somewhere and plan for it. I have a great example. I know I'm not going to get time to do it today, but I have a great example of some of the farms that we go onto by going and spending a small amount of money on soil sampling, and it is a very small amount of money. They actually save up to 40-50% in the inputs that they put back into the soil, because everyone in Ireland has this idea, well, sure, we throw out 2 bags of 10-10-20 twice a year, every year, and sure the grass grows. But actually, in most cases, we're overdoing it. And as fertiliser prices, as I already said, have gone through the roof, people are definitely a lot more observant of it. And, people like the ITBA and ourselves have a great package for ITBA thoroughbred breeders, whereby we've subsidised the cost of soil sampling by another 40 or 50% to try and encourage people to think that way. So we're actually something that might cost you €500, we're doing it for 200. And we're obviously losing money on it, but there's a big benefit for the industry as a whole. The same with Horse Sport Ireland. We have a couple of packages with them, mainly around biosecurity, but actually paddock biosecurity forms part of it. So when we're out there on the farm, we actually get time to talk to them about their inputs, how they optimise conditions, how they use aeration. There's actually a couple of brilliant tools out there now that might harrow, roll, aerate and overseed on one pass of a tractor. Now you think of the saving in labour costs, in diesel costs, that makes to a business. But it's thinking that way, and it's probably a difficult thing to do with people in Ireland in general. Get them to spend a small amount of money up front to be able to get the benefits in the long term. We are very reactionary. We don't think preventive. We don't think long term. We need to learn to think long term, because, like everyone has said around this table, most of us come from a generation of families of horse owners or cattle owners or whatever, farmers. And if we want the next generation to have those farms, we better start thinking about it very quickly.
Probably a good point to finish on, unless Maria, were you poised to say something there?
No, I just agree what Alan said is think of the future generations and what we're doing to set them up for a good future. And not just the horse industry, again, wider. We need a strong nature positive economy here in Ireland. And that involves every sector, every business coming together. As I said before, whole of society, whole of government approach to meet the needs of biodiversity loss and climate change. And we really do have to work together. It's collaboration is going to help us here. And let's try do that.
We were surprised, Maria, about there are 138,000 farms in Ireland, and we were surprised at how few farmers took up the offer for free trees out of that. I don't know, coming from a farming background, do you have an understanding of that mentality of?
I think I do, in terms of, I'm like, my dad will probably listen to this, but he knows what I'm like, and we often have many debates. And I think my dad is starting to listen and starting to understand the difficulties that we have to face, and that farming is a major player in this. But I think it has been a big blame game, and farmers are on the defence. No matter who I go talk to, I was talking to at an event a couple of days ago, and again, farmers there just again on the defence. It's like, no, we can't play this blame game. We need to be doing this together and working together and have conversations on the farm, really understand and really listen, help people be heard. And that's where I find the difference. Like, I've worked with lots of different farmers, and it really is. There are some brilliant people out there. I don't know if you know Donald Sheehan down in the Bride Project down in Cork, and the way he's brought together over 40 farmers to bring biodiversity onto their farms. Like, a great example. There are some great examples, and I think with the leadership for the equine business and the horse industry, we can really bring that together. It just needs some conversation. It needs some collaboration, and I think there's potential there. Having this conversation today has really shown that, and I think we just need to bring people into the fold and start bringing awareness and building capacity.
I think that's perfect, and I think that we may continue this conversation in the pub, but for now we've got to call it a day for this episode. It's been brought to you by the Irish Field in association with Horse Racing Ireland. Huge thank you to our guests for sharing their time and their knowledge and their passion, and also to you for joining our conversation. If you'd like to learn more about the biodiversity initiatives happening across Irish racing, or find out how you can get involved, head over to horseracingireland.ie. I would say it's not presumptuous to say that any of our panellists here wouldn't mind if you got in touch with them to learn more about their own projects and businesses and organisations. And the last thing to say is, don't forget to share the podcast with anybody who loves racing and nature, or maybe both. Thanks very much.